Okay, so yeah, we're talking about bringing core values to life today, which is a really exciting topic. I'm sure at your company, you've probably put a lot of thought into your core values and crafting those, but bringing them to life within your organization is really an entirely different matter. So today we're going to try to talk about some strategies for how you can do that. And I wanted to start off by introducing our speakers. Today, we're so lucky to be joined by Tanya Fish and Jesse George. First, Tanya is an employee experience strategy advisor at ITA Group, an engagement agency. Tanya started her career in administering corporate health and fitness solutions and eventually evolved into consulting with organizations on how to improve their population well-being. Today, Tanya helps employers to promote employee well-being through engagement solutions at ITA Group. Hi, Tanya.
Hi, Melissa, and hi, everybody out there. Look forward to sharing more with you today.
Thank you. And we also have Jesse George. Jesse has over 20 years experience in human resources. She joined Georgia's own credit union in March 2019, and her work there has focused on employee engagement, recognition, and improving the employee experience through the use of journey mapping and design thinking. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey, Melissa. Hi, everyone. So excited to talk to you today.
Thank you. It's really a pleasure to have you both on this webinar today, and I can't wait to hear more about your stories for bringing core values to life within your organizations. And again, I'm Melissa. I'll be moderating today. I lead the marketing team over at Coolleaf, which is a platform that helps companies to maintain a great culture as they grow and scale. And here's our agenda for today. We'll start off by reviewing some of the recent trends and research on company values. Then we'll hear from Tanya about how ITA Group created a strategy to increase core value awareness. Then we'll hear from Jesse about how Georgia's own rolled out their mission, purpose, values, and core competencies. And then we're going to have a bit of a fireside chat, which will be a chance for us to dive deeper into some of these things and talk about how to put those tactics into action within your own organization. And again, be sure to stick around till the end where we'll share that SHRM activity code and a free resource on core values. And if you have questions, drop them in the Q&A box and we will have some time for questions set aside at the end. But before we jump in, I really wanted to share a bit more context about how Coolleaf really plays into all of this. So Coolleaf works with a lot of organizations seeking to make their company values more visible in their day-to-day work. And what Coolleaf does is really help to develop a strategy for you that's really honed in on engagement and recognition initiatives that are tied to your mission, your purpose, and your values. So our platform helps you to gather feedback on your people's perspective on those things through surveying, and then comes up with engagement initiatives to bring those things to life, and then also helps you kind of measure as you go so you can see where you are with your values over time as well. So how that all comes together is in this integrated platform where every action is tied back to your organization's purpose and values. So every recognition or engagement activity that your team members might participate in will remind them of the why behind what they do. And where Coolleaf can be really valuable is in giving those consistent examples of the values in action over time, and then making that measurable for your HR team as well as your leadership team. Also, I wanted to call out that we recently launched the Great Retention, which is a movement that's all about reframing the Great Resignation into something more positive and actionable. In our new podcast, we're sharing positive stories of how leading workplaces are taking strides to care for and celebrate their people. And we'd love for you to join this movement. So be sure to follow the Great Retention and subscribe to our podcast. I'll put the info in the chat later so that you all can get that info and subscribe. So at a really high level, what are company core values? So they're the moral compass of your company's beliefs and the guiding principles behind your company's actions and the backbone of your company's culture. Unlike a purpose statement, core values are not intended really to be aspirational. They're supposed to capture the actions that your people should be living every single day. And I wanted to just share the values that we follow here at Coolleaf. So on the right, those are our 5 core values, which we use to recognize and celebrate one another. So why are we talking about core values today? Well, right now, a lot of us are thinking about the Great Resignation and the importance of creating a culture that attracts and retains top talent. And for the first time, the surging job market is giving workers the ability to rethink what they really want in their jobs. So more than ever, people want to work for companies that share their values, and they want to work for an employer that is authentic. Effective core values are a way to drive that authenticity, build stronger connections within your team, and increase engagement. And speaking of the importance of authenticity, ITA Group did a really fascinating research on this recently around how your employees' sense of purpose relates to your organization's goals. And this was what they found. When employees perceive that their company's mission and values are authentic, they're much more satisfied with their role. They advocate for their company, and they have a strong belief that their company wants to retain them. And I thought this was really powerful. And we'll be sharing a link to this white paper as well in our follow-up email today, so you can look at some of that research a little bit deeper. But I just thought that was really interesting and wanted to share that with you all. And before we turn this over to Tanya, I wanted to launch a quick poll just to kind of get your thoughts on where everyone is in how aligned are you with your organization's core values. So I'll go ahead and launch this poll. And if you guys just have a second, just answer. It's only one question. I just want to see where you all land on this and how aligned you are. So I'll wait just 1 second or a couple seconds to give everyone a chance to answer this question and then show the results. So right now we have about 63% participated. So thank you guys for participating. I'll give it just a few more seconds. All right, we're at 75% participation. So I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results. So I think you guys can see the results. I have it sharing now, but if not, I'm going to go ahead and read them out. So we have 43% at very aligned, which is great. That's awesome that so many of you are aligned with your company core values. Of course, we're a lot of people on this call, so kind of makes sense that we're very aligned. And then we have 39% somewhat aligned. So those are pretty neck and neck, very aligned and somewhat aligned. We have 9% neutral, 4% somewhat unaligned, and 4% unaligned, and nobody said not sure. So mostly a lot, very aligned or somewhat aligned, which is great. And as we're going through, I encourage you guys to also think about the rest of your organization and where you land. I'm not sure if you guys have done surveying and to see where your employees align on the core values, but something to kind of think about as we talk through today. And on that note, I would like to go ahead and turn it over to Tanya. I know that you've made some really powerful strides over at ITA Group around company purpose and values. So I'd love for you to just share a little bit more about your journey with this.
Thank you, Melissa. Our journey started a couple of years ago when we engaged with an engagement diagnostic at ITA Group, intended to understand how our employees were engaging in the workplace or where the opportunities lied for us. And what we heard through that engagement diagnostic is that employees were valuing things in our organization that weren't reflected in our core values. In some cases they were, but in other cases there was opportunity to take that voice of employee and consider it and consider what that meant to who we were as an organization to our employees. So often we're marketing who we are as a brand to our customers or to the external audiences. We heard we wanted to change our message to our employees. So that led us down a path to want to learn more. So if our employees at a high level, for example, valued the people that they got to work with, what did that mean? And that led us to our next step of engaging in some focus groups and getting a deeper perspective from the voice of our employees as to what they valued about working at our company and what brought them here and what's keeping them here from a retention perspective. We took all of that data and information and we worked with our leadership team to assess, one, a purpose statement for our company and if the current one was resonating, and two, our core values. And we ended up revising both. So we then took that information, had our marketing team work with us to create, through voice of employee still, a message that would resonate. And then fast forward, we took an approach of bringing our key leadership, our CEO, as the spokesperson for this new message. So at our annual meeting, we released our new purpose statement and our new core values from the voice of leadership, a credible voice that people would really want to hear from. We didn't stop there though. We know that once you release something through a core message, it's important to create the pulse of that message throughout the organization with frequency and in meaningful ways. So from there, we sought to create a plan, a communication plan and an engagement strategy for how we were going to keep our core values in front of our employees and to make sure that they understood what those new values meant. Because while we did take it from the voice of employee, not every employee shared that same voice. It was the majority. So there was opportunity to educate. So what I'm going to share through the next few slides are some of the strategies that we took to engage our employees. The first being an approach to educating. So we wanted to make sure with each of those new values, what do those really mean from a behavior perspective? So for each of 5 weeks, we have 5 core values. For each of 5 weeks, we really pinpointed what does that value mean, what are examples of behaviors of that core value, and what are some stories that we could share about how employees are demonstrating those core values. So we did a focused campaign that led with education. After education, we honed into, okay, now folks, we want you to go and observe those behaviors and seek to find somebody that you can recognize that's engaging in that behavior and demonstrating it in our workplace. And what you see for the results on this slide are how we shifted our engagement focus on each core value and saw greater recognition for that specific core value the week that it was of focus, each of the consecutive months that they were being communicated and that we were promoting that value. So as you look to the 5 bars on the right of that visual, you'll see that our core value in orange in the middle, when we focused on that, we saw the greatest engagement in recognition in that core value that we had ever seen. And when you see to the next one, the green bar being the biggest it's ever been, that was when we focused on that core value. And that was a theme through this challenge. So we believe that it was successful. Folks were paying attention, they were learning what that value meant, and they were going out and they were observing and recognizing behaviors that were demonstrating that core value. But we didn't want to stop there. So the next step we took was engaging in what we called a year in review. And what this was intended to do was to communicate to our employees a baseline of where they're at today with recognizing in our recognition program the core values, but also creating a little bit of peer pressure to show them where they stood compared to the rest of the organization and compared to the rest of their team. And it was really intentional to create some high energy around where they're at, but also to set that baseline, because we knew our next step was a challenge to increase the utilization and the volume of recognition. So if they knew where they were at, most people were not necessarily pleased where they stood next to their teams and other peers. That was an internal challenge that they were creating inside before we initiated the external challenge, which is what's showing now. The next challenge was a volume-based challenge where we said, employees, we challenge you over the next 10 months, so this was a long-term initiative, to engage in recognition of core values at least 5 times a month. And over the course of this fiscal year for us, to recognize each core value at least 5 times in others around you. There are always reward opportunities that we tie to this, but this was intended to raise that volume of recognition. And what you'll see on the next slide is how we showed visualization for our employees within our recognition platform of how they were doing in this challenge, live and month over month. And what we're seeing is record-breaking engagement in our recognition program and record-breaking focus on our core values and what they mean in our organization. We're seeing what you see in the bar chart is our previous 5 years in the light gray bar and our current fiscal year month by month in the dark gray bar. And you can see off the charts difference in how people are engaging in our core values through our recognition program. So what I'll leave you with from our perspective is it's really important to hear your employees, to make sure that your core values are authentic and that they connect with them. Once we were able to connect with our employees and then set them off on a journey to be educated on what they mean, to seek those behaviors out in our organization, and then to increase their engagement through our recognition program in our culture and in our core values, that you will absolutely see that pulse of your culture improve and engagement in who you are as an organization solidify. And the goal with all of that is to create advocates of your employer brand so you can have your employees referring others in and get them excited about staying and showing up at work each day. So with that, Melissa, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Tanya. That was so interesting. And I realized, I think I skipped over this slide, so I'm so sorry. I wanted to go back to it so you guys can all see it. This was the year in review that they did. I thought this was just so cool. And one thing that I really like that stood out to me about the way you launched this and the other programs that went along with it is really kind of honing into that sense of competition and like team competition and people being able to kind of measure where they are with the core values as this program runs. I find that just really fascinating, and I think it really gets into like a deep psychology. So I really love this. And by the way, we're sending out all of the slides after the webinar as well, so you guys can take a closer look at these really cool initiatives that ITA Group put together. And ITA Group is amazing at employee experience. So definitely take a look at these.
Thank you, Melissa. I would just add that it's important to know your culture. We know that we have a competitive bunch of folks here at ITA Group. So those challenges and that comparison to your peers is highly effective in changing behavior. So for us, that works. Definitely assess the tone of your culture though, and it might require modification if your culture and how your employees engage is different.
Yeah, that's really true. And that's good to point out as well. I also like how with the progress feedback that they get on their own kind of core values, they also can kind of measure themselves against themselves. So it doesn't have to always be competitive. So that might be something if you come from a population where you don't really want to have that competitive kind of atmosphere, you can always set up challenges and programs where people are just trying to kind of beat their own benchmarks. So this slide shows the progress feedback that ITA Group had for people, where people can really see what they've accomplished on each of the 5 values, where they are on act like owners, where they are on serve others, and they're trying to fill in that entire badge. So just thought that was really cool. But thank you so much. And now we'd like to hear a little bit more from Jessie George, who also has a really interesting perspective, very different experience, but want to hear more about how Jessie brought their mission, purpose, and vision to life and really rolled out their core competencies.
Thanks, Melissa. And thanks, Tanya, for sharing that. I mean, our stories are a bit different, but similar in the same right too. So our story started about 4 years ago, and this was after getting feedback from all levels of the organization that our mission, vision, and value statements really weren't resonating with employees. They weren't working. And I mean, they didn't relate to them. They didn't know which ones they were, whether it was the vision or the values. And they were written all over our walls. I mean, it was all over the environment, but no one really was living them. And so they were like just a bit marketing-y and kitschy. And so we heard this from the engagement survey, like through the scores where we just didn't do that great, and in the comments. So we undertook a process to kind of figure out what our mission, vision, values are, along with our core competencies. And this was a lengthy process. And we actually first started with our strategic plan, and we looked at, we were doing really well financially. So we asked the question, what do we need to do or focus on to be most successful? And how do we differentiate ourselves from other organizations or other credit unions? And, we developed a strategic plan that really focused on employee engagement and member engagement. And we connected those to incentives, and, we rolled those out to employees along with our mission, vision, value statement, and core competencies. But we really came up with that strategic plan first. And then from there, we worked on the mission, vision, and value statements. And we held several focus groups throughout the credit unions with all levels of employee, from frontline teammates to directors to VPs to executive leadership, to really look at what are the behaviors that support the goals and strategies, and what are we doing every day that makes up our culture, and those are the questions that really were asked from the focus groups to really figure out what those behaviors are and what those values are and what our mission is. And so we took all of that, and what we really found through those conversations is, the nature of a credit union is really exists to serve the people that are not served. I mean, that's why a credit union is around. They first started to create a place for people to bank where they weren't able to go to a regular bank. They started these credit unions. So we weren't really great at sharing like our purpose and the nature of a credit union. And so based off of all of the feedback from the employee focus groups and looking at who we are and what we do and what really resonated with employees, we condensed our mission, vision, and values into one statement called Banking on Purpose. And it's a longer statement than that, but that is the essence of it. And it includes all 3 groups of our stakeholders, our members and our employees and community, and about acting with purpose. And using that as our mission, vision, and values, we really looked at what are the core competencies that not only support those, but also help with interaction within our departments and between our departments, in efforts toward employee engagement. And so, with those conversations with employees, we've discovered and that the core competencies, if we really live those core competencies, we can achieve those member engagement and employee engagement, and we will be living up to our banking on purpose. And so we were able to create that. And, like Tanya, we also, we really have all employee day called Georgia's Own Day. And we really made a big splash with delivering our new mission, vision, and value statement and the core competencies, and really did it up around rolling that communication plan out. And then following kind of that one-day employee event, we did a lot around education and awareness. You know, we launched an intranet right around that time, a new one, and we really kind of were intentional of weaving that mission, vision, value statement, and core competencies through the design process. You know, we have TV screens in the branches and in the main office. We had it on, you know, there. We asked people, what does banking on purpose mean to you? What do these specific competencies mean to you? We had it on the TV screens, we have it on the desktop. So really like weaving it through the environment. And then one of our other strategies we used was around huddle guides and communication. And what huddle guides are is we have like weekly huddles, and they're, you know, like weekly meetings. And in order to ensure that like communication really kind of flows down and there is, you know, thoughtful conversations and really to gain understanding, we create these huddle guides that ask questions, for help leaders to ask questions in their weekly meetings, and really for just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Like, what does teamwork look like? What are examples of those? And really have like a robust conversation around the definition of that and what does that look like in action. And a few other things that we did was include it into our employee survey to get feedback departmentally on how we're doing on those competencies. And then each department took those results and hosted focus groups with the departments that they worked with the most, and looked to find ways to how they could live the competencies better. And then one of the last things we did was, well, we implemented it into our performance reviews, and then we found Coolleaf, and then we implemented it in our platform is called Connect, but we implemented it into our recognition program. And that really kind of was a game changer for us. And it really helps managers managers and employees focus on the core competencies. So it was really reinforcing the behaviors of those core competencies and of what those behaviors look like, and give examples of, you know, of positive performance with those core competencies. And Melissa, yes, on this next slide, you can see examples of, you know, communication, teamwork, accuracy, accountability. So that's a bit about what we did around the Connect Awards. And then on the next slide, you can see that one of the other things, you can see example of the Huddle guides. And then also with Connect, they have a manager dashboard where you can see how your team is doing around recognition, and you know, be able to see who has recognized your team, and just have visibility into, you know, both sides of the recognition as a leader. And we have done a lot of engagement around manager training around that dashboard and the Connect Awards. And, you know, when managers issue recognitions, you know, that typically flows down to peer recognitions. And so we have done a really big push around manager training, and we have increased our manager engagement to 70% on the Connect platform. Our employee engagement has increased by 17% after implementing our new mission, vision, and value statement. And we have the highest member satisfaction scores of all times. So I think really like streamlining the mission, vision, values and the core competencies, you know, has just really been so effective for us in all aspects. Yeah, so that's it. Thank you, Melissa.
No, that's great. And then Tanya also wrote in on the chat that said that she also loves the idea of the Huddle guides to support the leaders in those conversations that they have about the competencies. So I just wanted to point out that is a really cool thing that I haven't really seen a lot of before, is kind of creating that guide and resources for your leaders. And that's super important. And then, yeah, I just also wanted to say that, so Coolleaf works with Georgia Zone and Connect, their engagement platform, and they have done a really great job of just coming up with creative ideas kind of across the board to engage their people, like the Georgia Zone Day and the charitable donations that they do and all of that, make it really fun. So yeah, they've just been an incredible organization to work with, and it's awesome to see that you guys have had so much success and really seen your core competencies take off and your engagement grow like that.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa. I can't tell you enough that we did our most recent engagement survey, and you don't know how many comments we get about the Connect platform and how employees love it, and that it's just, they love recognizing their peers. So it's been a blessing for sure. And Tanya, I think the Huddle guides are so essential. I mean, in a lot of organizations, but in our organization, it was really great to give managers and leaders that guide to help, just guide those conversations, so they didn't have to do a lot of the thinking of asking those questions and and coming up with the definitions. Like, those definitions existed, and like the follow-up questions for employees to really come up with what teamwork looks like and in action, and how that was demonstrated recently, in that department. It's been really helpful for us.
That's great. That's really, both of those stories were really helpful. Really good to kind of hear the baseline of where you guys were, how you kind of navigated those journeys. But now we're gonna sit back and relax a little bit and dive deeper into some of these topics about how core values impact organizations' engagement, and then how our audience today can put some of these tactics that we've talked about into action. So now we're going to do the fireside chat portion of today's webinar. And again, if you guys come up with other questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section, and we'll get to those at the end as well. But I'd like to start off by talking about the role that core values play in shaping employee engagement as a whole. Tanya, would you like to kick us off here?
Absolutely, Melissa. I like the definition that you set forth earlier, Melissa, on what core values mean. Core values are the way things are done around here. So I've been sitting at a lot of baseball games lately, so I'm going to use game analogies here. I think core values are kind of like the rules to the game. When everybody is following those common standards, it allows a game to be played fairly and equitably, and seamless engagement across a team or a workplace, and getting people to work towards the same outcomes. And I think those rules or core values in a workplace and setting that common language is just really critical. When those core values don't resonate, however, with employees, you've heard all of us talk about how authenticity is important. If they're not authentic and in the voice of employee to where they understand what they mean, it can really create some frustration and tension in your culture. So core values, I think, are critical. I think it is like the pulse of your organization, the core of who you are. And when you get it right, it really does boost engagement and advocacy of your employees. Jesse, how would you chime in and build on that? I'm sure you have some other ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the things you said. I think, really the essence is if employees are aligned to the values of the organization, like, they're more likely to be engaged, and the values work really as like guideposts to support their everyday work and decisions, and which would make it easier to be engaged. And I think if you don't align, or you don't know them, or they're not authentic or equitable, then I think employees would find it hard to be engaged. So I think it's, they're essential to shaping employee engagement and make a huge impact on it.
Yeah, I think it's great to bring up authenticity again, because as we shared earlier, that stat from ITA, it's incredibly powerful. If your values aren't authentic, they're just not going to be meaningful. Even if you work really hard on them, they're not going to be meaningful to your employees. So I think that's great. All right, the next question, what are some of the biggest challenges associated with rolling out core values? And this can be challenges you might have experienced within your organization or just other things that you've seen.
Melissa, I think, aside from authenticity and values not being authentic, I think the second thing I would layer on top of that is your core values can't just be something that you post on a piece of paper or on a website. They need to be something that you help people understand and that are reminded about throughout the days, the months, and the years that people live within your culture. So they can't just be on paper. They need to be something that are repeated, that have focus on them, and that become an energy in your organization. And that just takes a consistent focus. Jesse, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that one of the biggest challenges, we faced is making sure they were clear and understandable. I mean, we did focus groups with several employees and, several layers and levels of employees, but we just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that they look like. I mean, not only the definition, but examples of what they look like for all departments, so like back office and branch employees. So what does, teamwork or accuracy look like in the branch versus maybe that human resource department, and really come up with those examples and share those, by department and interdepartmentally. I think just having a grasp on what that looks like and make sure they're relatable and understandable, because we use examples that we got from employees to really highlight each one of those core competencies. And then again, also just keeping it top of mind. I mean, every day we use these values, and, and ask yourself before you do something or before you send an email or how you interact with another employee, it's like, how does this support, our core value, and does it support it? It's like, I really feel like values are your guideposts in like how you interact with people and what you do. So, and then we just, we continue to reinforce our mission, vision, value statement and our competencies through various different methods.
That's great. Yeah, and I think it leads really well into this next question as well. I think you guys already touched on some of these things, but in terms of authenticity and really making sure that your values are not just you're paying lip service to them, but it's part of every decision you make. But I'd love to just hear more best practices that you guys might have for bringing those core values to life within your organizations.
I'll kick us off again. I think when I look at best practices, I think first about how all of us live in our technology all day, at work, on our phones. We can't keep our core values within a piece of technology. So you've heard us talk about our recognition programs and how they do house our core values, and they are critical to having a foundational piece of focus. But from a best practice perspective, I'm going to pull it out of technology and I'm going to talk about more the environment. So making sure that your environment, no matter where people are working, creates a reminder of core values is also a best practice I would bring to life. So walls in your building, screensavers on computers, on the intranet, talked about in corporate meetings, making sure that the environment that people live in every day encompasses the values is important. Second, I would talk about communication. We've talked about it already, but communicating regularly about the core values that do exist and what your culture represents is so important to make sure that people don't forget about it and that they are recalling what behaviors are important to represent your company day to day. To actually get people to engage, Jesse hit on this earlier, but leader engagement is my third piece. If leaders engage, Jesse talked about her data saying that when leaders engage, employees follow suit. Our data across all of our clients and our own companies suggests the same. In fact, we focus first on our leaders and set forth a challenge for them to get to in excess of 90% of leaders engaging in recognition of core values before we set a goal for employees. And what you'll see is once leaders embrace it, you see employees follow suit. They absolutely latch on and start to repeat the behaviors they're seeing in their leadership. So I'll leave us with those. Jesse, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, agreed with all of those. And I mean, we just tried a few things at our organization, you know, when we first launched our core competencies. And I think every department was doing something a bit different. And, you know, some things fizzled out. And then there was like something called team awesomeness over here and chocolate bars given out over here, and then different programs for one department and not the other. And I think, you know, what has happened is Connect, you know, Coolleaf has really helped us bring our core values to life. You know, it's housed in one place. It allows us to implement those core competency challenges. It really keeps it top of mind for both leaders and employees. And we do things that really support our mission, vision, and value statement, which is around banking on purpose. But our CEO runs challenges called Leading on Purpose. And it's a monthly share that, you know, he shares articles of like what are resonating with him in, you know, the world today and how to be a better leader or how to be a better employee, or, you know, just about procrastination or gratitude or mindset. And it's really kind of just everything that supports our value is in that Connect platform. It's visible, it's equitable, it's like, you know, available for all employees. So I think that's why we love Coolleaf. And again, you know, that manager training that you mentioned, that leader engagement, we've just done a lot around that. So I feel like it has really helped bring our core values to life, whether it's like, you know, it's in Connect, but it carries over into employee conversations, you know, it carries over into, you know, development plans. It really helps employees get promotions or transfer to different departments. We really have used that as like a sounding board to like really weave that through the employee life cycle.
Thank you. Thank you both for those answers. Those are some really great best practices, and so glad to hear that Coolleaf has been really helpful for your team at Georgia Zone, Jesse. And I'd love to know, how do your company's values tie into your organization's overall goals?
I would say similar to something Jesse just shared, our leadership absolutely plays a critical role in making sure that it's clear that our people are important to the success of our organization. So when we have our quarterly meetings, we are consistently hearing about what our purpose statement is as a company, what our values are, and how people are engaging in value-based behaviors in our culture. And that creates a reminder in of itself. And then the recognition program is the data behind that, right? So that's how we can prove out how are people engaging. Is it resonating? Are our values resonating? And it also can be that eye opener of, you know, people have quit their focus on our values, or maybe they've gotten busy and not been celebrating the positive behavior they're seeing around them. And that's core to who we are. So just to kind of wrap that up, as an organization, we have 3 key strategic focus areas. One is to create impact for our clients. One is to create impact for our community. And the third is to impact our people. So our core values and our people are a strategic priority. And because of that, we're seeing success in our program. and we're seeing success as a business, and we're seeing success with client satisfaction, because ultimately your people are part of your capital statement back to your business and the community. So Jesse, what else would you add to that?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd add much more. You know, as I mentioned before, our organizational goals, like we started with those and we worked backwards when we really condensed our mission, vision, and value statement and competencies. And like when we asked employees, like, what are the behaviors and cultures that we have and what exists and what do we need to support this, like member engagement, employee engagement, and you know, via communities. And that's how we came up with them. So it's like, you know, directly tied, I think, to our organizational goals. So yeah, I think they're so important.
That's great. And I love what you said, Tanya, about really putting people at the center of everything. I think that's really what it's all about in a lot of ways. And then we have one final question for our fireside chat portion. You guys talked a lot about recognition and how you put that as a part of your engagement strategy. So I'd love to just talk a little bit more about recognition particularly. How does that play a role in reinforcing your organization's core values?
You know, Melissa, when I hear this question, I guess I think about how to create behavior change in a population of people. So any behavior starts with awareness, and we've talked about creating awareness of core values as a key component of a strategy. And it evolves into education from a behavior change perspective. So once people are aware, there's opportunity to educate them deeper. And we've talked about how that happens as a part of a communication strategy through leaders, through leader behavior, through communication. But I see the recognition program as the action part of behavior change and the relapse prevention part of behavior change. It creates that repeatable focus, that ongoing focus and foundation for what culture is in your organization and what behaviors should be demonstrated day to day.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think just recognition just allows employees and leaders to recognize each other on the basis of demonstrating those core values through everyday behaviors that they're exhibiting or positive performance. You know, it helps like spread an understanding of what core values mean within that organization. So I think, again, that it plays a huge part in reinforcing it and keeping it top of mind and reminding everybody, this is what our culture is, this is what our, you know, competencies are, and, you know, and these behaviors, you know, specifically in Connect, get rewarded and get recognized. And, you know, these are the ones that we want to exemplify.
That's great. I think that's really powerful. Recognition is definitely a great way to see those examples in action. So thank you both so much for sharing that with all of us. It's really, really helpful and informative. And I hope the audience is getting a lot out of this. I know I am. So we have 10 more minutes for audience questions. And then I wanted to go ahead and share some of the resources that we talked about earlier. So Coolleaf has put together this 4 team building activities to drive core values guide. So it's free for everybody who joined today. So we'll send this out after the webinar to everyone along with the replay link. If you're looking for just fun examples of ways to bring your team together around core values, then I think this could really help. It has things like book groups around the core values, appreciation and recognition, and other ideas as well that you guys can take away from today. And I know, Jesse, in the chat, somebody was asking if they could see an example of your Huddle guides. So I don't know if you're comfortable with that, but we could also send that out. Yeah, that's awesome.
I'll send you one, Melissa.
Awesome. Yes, we will redact any information that you don't want us to send out, but it's a really cool resource. So yes, we would be happy to send that out as well, Jamie. And then so now we're almost at an hour. So I'm going to go ahead and share the SHRM activity code that you guys can use toward 1 PDC credit towards your SHRM recertification. So if you want to take a screenshot of this slide, we'll also send it out in the email, and I'll pop it into the chat now as well. 1 second, so you guys can see this. And then I'm also going to put the link to, this is the core values guide. You want to go ahead and look at that. And then this is also the link to the Great Retention Podcast, which is we're really excited about, and also looking for guest speakers as well. If you are interested in, sharing your perspective, definitely reach out to us, because it's a brand new podcast. We're really excited to be just speaking with leaders all across the employee experience to share their stories. And Faye, I'm sorry we're not able to offer HRCI credit at this time. This is actually our first time offering recertification credits for a webinar. So we hope to be able to offer those next time, but for now we're just doing the SHRM credits. Sorry about that. And we do have a couple of audience Q&A questions, but before we dive into those, I wanted to let everyone know that there is a post-webinar survey that I would love for you guys to fill out if you have a minute. It's very quick. You'll be redirected to that right after the Zoom call ends. We'd love to get your feedback if you have some time to complete that for us. And before we do the Q&A, I wanted to ask both Tanya and Jesse to share their final takeaway for our audience today. Tanya, if you want to start.
Absolutely. Thanks first, Melissa, for creating this conversation around core values. It's so important to get your core values right is really the core of my message. Don't underestimate the importance of making sure that your core values aren't just stock words that you're pulling from common core values on websites that are assessing that. Make sure they're true to your organization first and foremost. And other things you've heard me say already, but I'll just kind of wrap up with a bow, is make sure that the culture is sustaining the core values through consistent focus and through recognition, where you're challenging people essentially through a recognition program to look for that behavior, to observe it, and then to document and celebrate it with somebody else. It's a great way to solidify the good behavior that's happening in your culture, and to then share examples of good behavior out with the greater employee population. And it's good data. Your recognition program can be a great KPI on your culture. So there's always engagement survey data, but your recognition engagement is a great engagement KPI around how your culture is performing. And finally, I would wrap up with, don't rely just on technology. It's important, but don't rely just on technology to drive your culture. Engage in communications, like the Huddle guides that Jesse mentioned. Create challenges and set goals to get people activated. Activating on those behaviors that you set within your core values is really the key to success. If you can get there, your culture is going to thrive. Jesse, what would you add?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd love everybody just to walk away with today is just taking time to work on with all levels of the organization to create your core values is such important work. And you talked about that a lot, Tanya, and making sure it's in the voice of the employee and really getting to the heart of like, what are our core values? And I mean, this work can go toward so many efforts toward like employee engagement and attracting the right people and retaining the people that you have. It really brings, I think, a transparency to the core of the organization and helps employees like support their purpose and their everyday work. You know, when they are aligned with your values and they're there at the organization, they're being able to fulfill their purpose and, you know, really help guide their everyday work. So I think it's essential to get to the, like you say, authenticity of the core values. So yeah. And thank you so much both for having me and participating in this conversation. I've loved it.
Thank you.
I love that you brought it back around to purpose. Sorry, Melissa, one comment. Individual purpose, because I think we've talked about organizational purpose through core values, but making it clear and transparent what your organizational values or core values are allows people to see if their personal values align to the organization. And in our world today, as we're all seeking to find meaningful work and meaningful engagement, that's so important. So thank you for bringing up purpose at an individual level.
Yeah, I agree. That's really important. Thank you so much. Those are great closing thoughts. I feel like I need to write them down somewhere. I love it. Thank you. And we have two questions actually that came in. So the first one, and you guys both, I would love for you both to answer. The first one is from David. He's asking, what is more valuable in terms of authentic engagement? Monetary or non-monetary appreciation of core values and the mission?
David, great question. I'm not going to answer it black and white though, because I'm a gray kind of person. I think they're both important. When you just are authentic in words through non-monetary type recognition, that absolutely is important in a culture. However, when you are seeing discretionary effort demonstrated through employees and it's connected to core values, monetary recognition can go a long ways as well. So I say both. I know that's not answering your question directly, but that's my story and I'm going to stick to it. Jesse, what would you say?
No, I couldn't agree more. And I feel like everybody loves to be recognized differently. I mean, I know, monetarily, people it is very, people enjoy that, and need it. But a lot of people aren't motivated by money and they really do need that, public recognition or private recognition. I mean, it's really important to talk to your employees of how they like to be recognized. And, like you say, it's, if they like it public, private, do that's non-monetary. And if possible, reinforce it reinforce those values or the demonstration of those values, with projects or, performance through the monetary thing. So not an answer, not a yes or no, but both.
No, that's great. And that's a good point, Jesse. I think that ties into what Tanya was saying earlier about every population being very different. So definitely want to listen to your people. And then our last question that we have time for, we're at 2:00. So this will be our last question for today. One of our attendees was wondering about the questions that you used when you were asking your employees and you wanted to change your core values to get them more engaged. You both kind of talked about doing surveying. So what were some of those questions that you guys were looking at and asking your people?
I'll just drop a couple that I think are fun. We first ask what drew you to the organization. That's a good one for new talent, especially when it's fresh in their mind that they chose the company for a reason. What was it that brought you here? For people who have stuck around for a while, why do you stay is a great question. What are the reasons that you stay at our company? My favorite one, though, is what's the superpower of our company? What would you demonstrate if we were a superhero as a company? What would you describe us as through behavior? And that can become a really cool way to grab some new words around what a core value might be.
I love those. Oh my gosh, we need those. I'll give you some. I can't even remember because it's like 4 years ago. But some of the, I mean, it was like, what are behaviors that you do every day? How do you interact with other employees? Like, what are the 5 words that come to your mind? Those are just some of, the ones that I remember. But Tanya, I love, if I was like the superpower one, I love that one.
That is great. And that's also a great idea for our next content piece. So maybe gonna ask you guys both for tips on those, and we'll try to put together a blog post or something, because that is great. And it's hard to come up with those questions. And I love the superhero one. That's really clever. But we are at time now, so I just want to say goodbye to everyone and thank you so much for joining us. Again, if you have a few minutes to complete the post-webinar survey, we'd really appreciate it. But thank you for your time.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having us, Melissa. Thanks everyone for attending.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Jesse. You guys were so helpful. Really valuable information. Thank you. Bye-bye. Gonna sign off.